So I'm really happy to announce that we've got a real treat for you today. Those of you who've travelled to Berlin before by air will most certainly have come across Tegel Airport, at least if you travelled to Berlin before 2020. Today we're joined by Gudrun, CEO of Tegel Project, who is here to tell us about what's become Berlin's largest and, in my opinion, most innovative urban redevelopment project. I think it's a fascinating project, and I think there's a lot to learn for us here in Australia. Yesterday we met with City of Melbourne officials, and after this conference we'll be travelling with Gudrun to Sydney to meet with government and industry representatives who are all involved in the Tech Central project up there that some of you may have heard of. On Friday we'll be in Brisbane to meet with local government and industry partners who are also involved in Brisbane 2032 Olympic Games preparation. I'll introduce Gudrun properly in a moment, but first I'd also like to introduce our respondents and our panellists for today's session. Mitra, Anderson, Oliver, could I ask you to just stand up, please? Hello, Mitra. Mitra is Acting Director, Commonwealth Games Infrastructure Delivery down here in Victoria. Mitra has over a decade of experience in strategic planning and design, sustainable cities and housing policy. She was previously Senior Advisor for Planning in the Victorian State Government, and Mitra led reform projects on new regulation for affordable housing, Victoria's first apartment standards, landmark legislation for protection of urban waterways, and reshaping some of Melbourne's major urban renewal projects such as Fisherman's Bend and, of course, Arden. Secondly, we're joined by Peter Halliday. Peter, if I could ask you to stand briefly. Hi, Peter. Peter, I'm happy to say, is the new Chairman and CEO of Siemens Australia. In a career spanning 24 years at Siemens, Peter has held senior roles within the company in Australia, Asia and Europe, including Vice President for Siemens Building Technologies in Taiwan, General Manager for Building Automation in China, along with Senior Vice President for Building Technologies in the ASEAN region out of Singapore. Prior to relocating back to his home country of Australia in 2021, Peter was also the Global Head of Siemens Building Performance and Sustainability Division, operating out of Siemens Smart Infrastructure Business Head Office in Switzerland, in Zug, as we heard last night, and has been involved in some of the most important building infrastructure projects in the world. You're both very welcome. Turning now to Gudrun. Gudrun Sack, as I said, is CEO of the Tegel Project, which, as we shall see very shortly, encompasses the Urban Tech Republic, the so-called Schumacher Quartier, which is Schumacher Quarter, and a new campus of Berlin's University of Technology. Gudrun is an architect by trade, and before becoming CEO of Tegel Project, she was a partner at Tegel Architekten, which has offices in Berlin and Karlsruhe, and which I myself had the pleasure of working at some 25 years ago when Gudrun was my boss. Gudrun's focus is on sustainable planning and building, as well as on anchoring qualities and new standards in residential construction, and on the implementation of forward-looking and at the same time practical urban planning solutions. She's a board member of the Berlin Chamber of Architects and the Berlin Building Group Architects Network. That's a translation, by the way. It comes from Baugruppen, which is a concept that has achieved quite a bit of uptake here as well in Australia in recent times. And I think for those of you who are interested in that concept, that's a side conversation that you should definitely seek Gudrun out to talk about. She is also a member of the Housing Construction Working Group of the BDA, which is translated as the Association of German Architects. After studying at the TU Berlin and at the HFRK Vienna, Gudrun started her professional career with Norman Foster and also with Will Alsop, which is a fantastic British high-tech lineage there, Gudrun. Well before that academic training, she had also, out of interest, completed an apprenticeship within building restoration. So with that brief introduction, I'd like to call Gudrun up to the stage. Thank you, Gudrun.
Yeah, hello and good morning. Thank you so much for having me here today and at this conference. And I'm definitely glad to be here in person to experience the atmosphere and make the most of the exchange. I'm looking forward to learning from your projects and from everyone's expertise in this room today. Thank you so much for the invitation, and I especially want to thank, of course, Brony and Mathew, who both have been to Berlin and visited the Tegel Project. And so many thanks also to all the organizers who made the conference possible today. So making change. Sustainability in the climate crisis means everybody has to do everything as possible everywhere. So we are talking today about the conversion of the former airport Tegel into a future-proof, smart, new, mixed-use district. Tegel Project will manage all of this. We are a management organization of the Berlin government. We will build the infrastructure, doing the location marketing and the communication, and doing the construction of a few of the existing buildings.
Berlin TXL. The dream of flying is fulfilled. Time for new dreams. Because Tegel Airport makes way for Berlin. Berlin TXL is rethinking the city. Offering space for business, for green industry, and for projects of all sizes. Enabling education and research for clever minds. Creating solutions for a city life which will be better in the future than anything we imagine today. And growing a community sharing all that. The former airport transforms into a new part of the city. Schumacher Quartier will be a new home with climate-neutral energy and new mobility strategies. As Berlin TXL will become the launchpad for the green technologies of the future. Developing solutions from research to production in the urban tech republic. What does the city of the future look like? It's a city with clean air built with materials which are in harmony with nature. A city that generates more energy than it consumes, featuring a sustainable clean water cycle. A city where we can finally be human again because we reconcile city and nature. Become part of the new Berlin. Let's create the city of tomorrow together, in the Schumacher Quartier and in the urban tech republic.
Yeah, I would say it's looking pretty good, but let's return to the present. How do we get from an abandoned airport site to the city of the future? If you ever have been to Berlin before, as Mathew mentioned, before the pandemic, you arrived at Tegel. The airport holds a very special place in people's heart, and most Berliners left the airport because of its short distances. And in fact, when it opened back in the 1974, it was the most modern airport in the world. This airport is very unique. It features a very holistic design. It's a strong geometry. You can feel it everywhere. It's a true icon of the 70s architecture. You see the colors and the shapes. And it was no surprise then that the entire airport ensemble was declared as state heritage site in the 2019s. It thus now holds a landmark status, which is on one hand great because it will preserve the heritage for generations after, but on the other hand, it will surely make for some challenges in the redevelopment of the terminal buildings. I don't know if you have the same strong heritage regulations here in Australia. So you know it's not only fun to have a heritage. Yeah, a glorious past, as you can see. The airport closed in the 18th to November 2020. The grounds were handed over to the Tegel Project in August 2021, and we will now ensure that the city will get a site that makes the most of its potential. This party was last year. It was a dinner party. You can see there are a lot, I think 4,000 people sitting around tables. And yeah, from the helicopter, yes, we have taken this picture. Yeah, Berlin TXL has such a true legacy of innovation, from it being the most modern airport in the world to being extremely efficient in handling huge passenger capacities at its small size. The spirit of forward-looking design and technology will guide the transformation of the site. If you're speaking about transformations, we should look at Berlin for a moment. As a reminder, with its nearly 4 million inhabitants, Berlin is by far the biggest city in Germany. So quite a bit smaller than Melbourne in terms of population and a lot smaller. Berlin city areas is only about a tenth of Melbourne. Anyway, about the history, Berlin is truly a capital of transformation, seeing different pushes of urban development and certainly facing its fair share of challenges. You can see here the main dates of challenges we had in Berlin. It was, of course, after the Second World War, and it was when the wall came down in the 1989. In terms of industrial employment, Berlin really had to deal with a huge collapse. Berlin is today one of the world's key hubs for cutting-edge research, attracting talent from all over the world. It's also one of the key players in the startup ecosystem in Europe, if not worldwide. So we are often called the startup city. But the challenges we have all of the world, we also have in Berlin. So it's a resource scarcity, it's a climate change, it's a demographic change, it's an energy transition, it's an increased and ongoing urbanization, and it's a digitalization. These are the issues we are dealing in the Tegel Project. Now cities around the world have started to tackle these challenges. We have seen the development of a lot of smart cities around the globe, all of them trying to address the issues in their own way. We in Berlin certainly have realized too that cities worldwide are at the same time the cause of climate change and the solution for the climate change. As engines of growth, innovation, and prosperity, they are accountable for 75% of global carbon emission, but also 18% of global CDP generation. Thinking to address climate change can thus not be done without also the concept of rethinking the cities. Rethinking the cities also involves making Berlin climate neutral. The Senate of Berlin has passed legislation already in 2016 to achieve this by 2050. You can see it in the diagram. One is for Berlin and one is for the Europe goals, so the European Green Deal. So how does the project of Tegel fit into the transformation process? How do we take on the challenges of urban sustainability? So let's dive in. Berlin is used to have 3 airports. Tempelhof closed in 1928, recently closed, and Tegel recently closed, and in the south you can see Schönefeld, which was made into a modern single hub airport to the south of Berlin. That BER is now the only airport we have in Berlin. As a former inner city airport, Tegel was very convenient, accessible for most people in the city. The privileged location means that Berlin is given a unique possibility to develop a huge chunk of prime real estate in the middle of Berlin. So it's just 10 minutes to the Kudamm and 10 minutes to all centers you do have in Berlin. The total area of Berlin TXL covers a total surface from nearly 5 square kilometers. So it's really like the development you have here in Melbourne, this fisherman land. Yeah, you compare it with the city of Paris, the airport, or with Manhattan. And in order to come up with a master plan for the site, initial 6 international architecture and planning teams were given 6 different tasks to develop the site. These proposals were all very distinct and thus had very different concepts for the development of the site, which all the consequences they would have for the city in long term. In the following, I shall briefly introduce you 2 design proposals in order to illustrate you all 6. One is of GMP. It's designers of the airport, and from the airport Tegel, and also from the airport BER. And the GMP concept is came very forward-looking approach, making the site into an eco-city with focus on renewable energy and especially photovoltaic installations. So this is one of the 6 designs we had. And another one is a playground by West 8. And this was a design proposal for the candidature for the Olympic Games. So it's all about Olympic Games, this design. Yeah, and here you can see the master plan, and we have taken from all these designs parts to make them the master plan. And we also had 8 site conferences with the public. We did it in shopping malls and football clubs and everywhere, just to get the public. And all the small ideas the public also gave in came into this master plan concept. So we have 3 different areas. You can see it. It's the orange one is a main area of the airport buildings, and around that is an innovation park dedicated to green urban technologies. It's called Urban Czech Republic. On the other side, you see the Schumacher Quartier. It's a residential neighborhood and a huge landscape park. You have it in the north. And it's just a biodiversity and leisure for the residents, and as well as heathland. So we are keeping main of the green part like they are. As you can see, the development of the site is completely value-driven. Our goal is a green, socially fair, and productive city. So let's start with a short look about the Urban Czech Republic. The concept of sustainability provides the most comprehensive model. The Urban Czech Republic embodies this idea in a very unique way. The campus district of the Urban Czech Republic is one of the first pilot projects in Germany to be awarded the platinum certifications by the DGNB. So it's the highest level you can get for a green district certification in Europe. The Urban Czech Republic offers spaces for industry, business, and science. This will be the place where urban technologies are researched, developed, produced, tested, and exported. This will be the place where science and research meet industry and business, and where startups meet investors. And they all are working together on the solution for the city of tomorrow. So we will host a creative community that is open to everyone who subscribe to our values formulated in our manifesto. So people make cities, innovation needs freedom, technology serves nature and humanity, there's a resource in everything, and adaptability is stronger than planning. This is the manifesto of the Urban Czech Republic. And all players on site, people from research, higher education institutions, as well as industry, will thus have a common ground in order to use the Urban Czech Republic as a living lab. So in the middle there is this hexagon, and there the Berlin University of Applied Science will move in with all faculties relating to the Urban Czech Republic into the hexagonal building. It's called the Terminal A. So the university will be an important anchor tenant with nearly 3,000 students. And here are some visions of what the current planning looks like. Yeah, and this is the surrounding of the old terminal building. And the head building, it's called Terminal B, will become the flagship of the Urban Czech Republic. It will become an innovation and research center. As I mentioned before, the Urban Czech Republic is a place dedicated to developing and producing solutions for the city of the future. But these technologies are also key in the planning of the site. They are enablers for climate neutrality and are thus important in order for Berlin to reach its goals in the next decades. So we have this 6 issue you can see here. It's energy, it's mobility, it's water, recycling, new materials, information and communications, technologies. And everybody who's dealing with these issues can build in the Urban Tech Republic. Their sectors are key for our residents on site, but they are all equally important in shaping the development and planning of our redevelopment. Up to date, we have identified more than 140 smart infrastructure components to be realized on site. And let's have a look to some of them. One main issue is, of course, the energy. Yeah, we are having a low exergy net, and the contract for this low exergy net are already signed, and the net is under construction. And it's water-based, and the temperature is about 40 degrees Celsius. Yeah, and the concept focuses on a low exergy infrastructure, what will use excess heat from the industry in order to meet demands in the residential neighborhood. This system also allows us to tap into our renewable energy resources, combine them all on a district level, and via a smart grid manage and distribute the loads efficiently. The concept furthermore allows us to connect different sectors, as you can see here in the pictures. And the storage medium, as I said, will be water, and you have it in 4 steps. You will have the realization of this low exergy net. And all this kind of nets are really for a town planning project essential. It's only possible because the entire site remains a property owned by the government. So it's all still keeping one piece of land. All future actors on the site, be it industry or resistance, must lease the land. And the question was how long is this lease period? It's about 99 years in the moment. Moving on to ICT, the digital world has become more and more integral to our daily lives. The beginning of the smart city movement was focused on digitizing the city, while we at Tegel Project take a more holistic approach to the ideas of smart cities. We are, of course, also ensuring that Berlin TXL has a sound digital infrastructure. But we are purposefully using data and make sure to make it available to key actors so that we can make informed decisions on planning. And we did it already, like to have an impression how the proportions are. So we used it already for the planning process, but also to ensure a whole range of services to citizens as well as companies on site. We are planning this future hub platform and open source marketplaces that will further help to make urban data usable in order to make the city more livable and ecological. Our digitalization unit focuses on data governance and endeavors data excellency. We are as transparent and secure as we can be, and we are creating an added value for cities. Yeah, we also try to ship, as Oliver Lang explained it a bit in his concept. We also had a good contact with Oliver. We also try to chip all the components then in the building side, so we can do afterwards a Madasta and to say in point of cradle to cradle what kind of material have you used, and all this will find the place in this future hub. Yeah, now it brings us to the Schumacher Quartier. So Berlin is growing and needs affordable housing, and the Schumacher Quartier will provide upwards 5,000 homes for more than 10,000 people, together with the corresponding like schools, daycare centers, shopping facilities, and lots of greenery. Further 4,000 homes are planned in the neighborhood of the Schumacher Quartier, so we are having 9,000 to 10,000 flats in the project of TXL. So what makes the Schumacher Quartier unique? It is 100% non-profit orientation. It is a goal to serve the common good and public interest. This means it will include, apart from environmentally friendly building materials, social housing. Berlin's municipal building companies are going to build half of the housing projects, while smaller building collectives, like Mathew mentioned, Baugruppen and Baugenossen, they are quite old, they are nearly 100 years old. And Baugruppe is a very new model we have in Berlin. They are doing the other half of the building, and 10% we have student living. So the idea is you can rent it from the housing companies, or you are actors in particular, build for your own and use it by your own. It's a bit to compare it like you have this model in Paris. You have this citizens flat, so everybody has his own flat, and it's the only thing that why in Paris still people can live inside of the city. So as it will be sustainable and social diverse areas, Schumacher Quartier will make an important contribution to the strategy for housing construction and urban development in the German capital. And a chapter all partners involved have agreed upon 7 guidelines for the development of Schumacher Quartier. So first, housing for everyone, urban green space and public areas, animal-aided design, open educational landscapes, climate-friendly and water-sensitive urban development, district with environmentally friendly mobility, and communication, participation, and transparency. So first, the mobility concept is very unique. So we are completely car-free in the district. You can see here the 5 red points. This is the mobility hubs, where you can base your private cars, and the rest is only for bicycles and small mobiles to use. So we will introduce new modes of transport, more accessible via mobility hubs, where they can access a vehicle sharing and infrastructure. We're also planning drone landings on these mobility hubs just for the delivery services. Yeah, our next theme is the water, and the whole area will be a sponge city.
In a natural ecosystem, rainwater is soaked up by soil and vegetation. The majority then evaporates, and the rest filters deeper into the ground. The evaporating water then cools the surroundings. Cities disrupt this system. Water can't soak through the concrete and is piped away. The sponge city strategy aims to keep rainwater where it lands, to imitate the natural water cycle. Buildings are covered in green roofs and facades, and down on street level, urban wetlands and roadside trenches known as swales filter runoff and hold water, keeping the city cool by imitating nature.
As architects, 3,000 years we put the water in sewage systems and far away from the houses. But now we're doing the other way around, and we say water can be everywhere. It could be on the places, it could be on the roofs, it could be on the facades, and it all should go to evaporate and to bring it back to nature. And that's a completely new design concept in the town planning. And yeah, we will do it in the whole area, this sponge city. Another topic that makes Schumacher Quartier very unique is the planning and implementation and the focus on timber construction. So we will do the whole area completely out of timber buildings. And sustainable cities need a new form of construction with sustainable, renewable materials. Therefore, the city of Berlin has decided to organize a so-called future hut to organize the process of an urban timber cluster in regional economics systems. But it also becomes a command center for the construction management and the manufacturing facilities for the implementation of timber construction in the Schumacher Quartier. Why buildings out of timber are crucial to making our cities more sustainable. The idea of sustainable, affordable, and attractive living spaces is only possible with innovations in the whole value chain management, forest to city, for the production of urban space. This enables a switch from a concrete-based method of construction to a more attractive and sustainable serial timber construction. And timber is a material we do have in the region of Berlin and his surroundings. This future hut on the site will be beginning of this urban timber cluster will all its innovations which we should use for more buildings project all over Berlin. The organization's chain forest to city starts in the forestry. So we are going to, it's a win-win situation. We are going to change the forests. We are bringing out 50% of the trees because it's really a monoculture, and we are bringing 50% different trees in it. So we're making the forest more resilient, and with trees we can just build the whole area of the Tegel Project. The organization chain forest to city starts in the forestry. It involves a supply chain management, circular economy, clever urban and construction logistic, robotic assembly, digitalization, and of course a clever financing. Nevertheless, this change should be as simple as possible, and the advantage is becoming independent from the daily timber market price and being cheaper in the construction with the timber because it's all coming from the nearby forest. Yeah, our next issue is biodiversity and the animal-aided design. We already have a group of mixed sheep and donkeys on the field. They are preparing the field, and a lot of people asking why you are building, why you don't build on this site, but it's all this green area, and we are keeping this heathland, is a compensation area for the dense building parts. So we need this area. We are not allowed to build on these areas because we're doing it quite dense on the other areas. So this is a compensation area for the building areas. And then the point of animal-aided design. So we shouldn't build in future not only for the human beings. We should also think about the animals. And I don't know how it's in Australia, but in Germany, if you see the last 3 years, we have 25% less birds, we have 25% less insects, and the situation is really catastrophic, and we should do something even for the animals, and we will do it also in the whole area. So we are preparing. If you go to this animal-aided design, you can find it in the net. So you see it's not allowed to have any more glass corners because it's not helpful for the birds. And we are having like special nest things in the facade. So the animals could live there in the facades, on the roofs, everywhere. It's small things you can do, but you should do that in future we will have all kind of animals on the place. Yeah, that's the point of the animal-aided design, and I hope you will also do it in Australia in future. Yeah, and you see there are things you can't plant. So we had different things in the last time on the airport. We had here you can see we have the arrival hub for the Ukrainian refugees in our terminals in the moment. We have about 5,000 beds in the terminals, and we are the main point for the people arriving in Berlin. We had, in the last half year, we had 80,000 people in this place. And before it was a vacation center. And yeah, and one important concept also for the Tegel project is interim use. So you can see we had the Green Tech Festival here. We had 3,000 persons on this picture in the hangar. And yeah, we are having an all marketing apartment in our project, and we have event manager, and for us it's really important that all the time something will happen on the airport, so we are not a closed dead area. So we would try to make it lively from the first date. So this is interim use. And we also have 500 people working in autonomous driving on the field. So that's what we have very special. And it's, for example, it's Easy Mile from France and its way. And we have a lot of other people already working on the existing old buildings you have seen in the beginning. Yeah, and my last picture, just to show you the timetable of the project. 2027 we will mark the year when the university will move in, and we will be opening the doors to our flagship innovation center. And 2027 we will also have the first residents in Schumacher quartier. So that's in, let's say, in 5 years we hope to have the first projects built on site or renovated on site. Yeah, and at all we will be completed in 2040, but you never can plan. Yeah, Thank you.
If I could ask our respondents, Peter and Mitra, to come up and take a seat here, and we'll begin with our conversation. Hello, hello, hello. Hello, hello,
Yep.
hello. Can you hear me up the back? Is that just because I have a loud voice or through the PA? Okay, good. Thank you so much for that, Gudrun. That was really incredible. As promised, it's a deep dive. I've seen a truncated version of that presentation yesterday, as I mentioned, at the City of Melbourne, and it was really great to get right down into the detail of that. I can report that the City of Melbourne councillors in attendance yesterday were most fascinated by animal-aided design, in case anyone here was wondering. To Mitra and Peter first, I might just, before we get to your responses to Gudrun's presentation, I might just quickly ask if you have any questions for Gudrun first.
I definitely have a lot of questions for you. That was a fantastic presentation, thank you. The scale of that development is astounding, really, and quite an amazing thing to take on. Just quickly, when are you expecting at least, full build out or close to full build out of the precinct? Like what year are we talking? For completion or 2040, okay. So I was particularly interested, so many questions. The model of land development that you're doing there in Berlin, I have to say, isn't done very often in Australia in terms of the ownership model. And I'm really curious to hear a bit more about that. As I understand it, in Berlin, not so long ago, you were broke in Berlin. The government had very, very little money. The city, as I understood, as a state, took money from the rest of Berlin to subsidise Berlin's operations. That's obviously turned around in the last decade, where you've had a really insurgence of economic activity into Berlin, and new industries, a real dynamism into the city. But if you are going to have 100% ownership by the state of the land ongoing, how are you going to pay for all of this?
Okay, you're leasing the land, so you have an income every year because of the money you get. That's the first point. Then we are only doing, as Tegel Project or as a government, we are only doing the infrastructure. So because we are leasing the land, you can have all these nets. Yeah, you have this low exergy net, you have the future hub, you have the digital net, and all this kind of stuff. And this is also paying the government. But the buildings, they are not paid by the government. Yeah, only the infrastructure. So we are only organizing the infrastructure. And the housing, I mean, these groups of Baugruppe, so it's just people coming together and build by their own, and of course they have to pay it. And this housing companies, they are government owned, yeah, but they have already thousands of flats, and they are doing this project. So the government is only doing the infrastructure and has the income of the lease. And actually, if you sell it, it's you get 3 times. In 99 years, again, you get 3 times the price of selling. So you get the same money and even more. But yeah, that's the point.
So just one thing on this before I let you ask a question. Was it always the plan to run it like this, or was there a decision made? Was the politics heavily involved in that decision to do it? It's certainly not the case in Australia. It's not how we do broad-scale urban development. We might do a bit of what we call precinct structure planning or zoning control if it is in government ownership to the start, and then we'd sell it off to build, typically speaking, apart from small exceptions.
We have a social and green government since years. We are a very poor city. So the last mayor said we are poor and sexy.
I noticed that in your renders, actually. Everyone looked very, very cool.
Okay, but still we are poor and green. And yeah, there's a decision 5 years ago, I think, we are not selling a single piece of plots of land. Every land the government is owning, it's only to lease. Yeah, that's a decision of the government. And even the decision to build everything, all public buildings are built out of wood. It's also a decision they made. That's a green government, so social and green. Yeah.
Because I think the last time they tried to redevelop an airport in Berlin, there was a statewide referendum about it, and now no one can ever build on it at all. So,
Tempelhof, you mean?
yeah, Tempelhof.
Yeah, maybe that's also something, that's a point you have. Tempelhof, the government, it was 10 years ago maybe, or even more, 15 years ago, and there the government made a planning, and then we get this referendum, and I think 80% of the Berliners have been against this Tempelhof planning because the government did something, they're not spoken, spoke to somebody, and nobody knows what they're doing. And that's why all the Berliners was against Tempelhof, and Tempelhof there's still nothing. And that's why Tegel learned from Tempelhof, and then they made these 8-side conferences where really tried to make participation, to ask the public what to do, what you want. So it's out of the past to say we must change something. And yeah, that's why we made it maybe in this form in Tegel. We have learned, yeah, from the old airport.
Amazing, thank you. I have more questions, but I think I should give Peter a chance.
Thank you. Good, great presentation, good overview. And I see a lot of similarities of what Tegel's doing to what Siemens is doing in smart city development. And we are a neighbour to the Tegel development. Siemens is redeveloping in the north part of Berlin what we've called Siemensstadt, which is smaller in comparison. It's only 73 hectares, and I think yours is 495, so you have quite many more challenges to deal with than we do. But when we look at development and we're developing our plot of land into mixed industrial, residential, also academia coming onto our site, we're controlling the technology. We're putting in as much Siemens technology as possible. And I see that your design and wish is to integrate a lot of the technology that will come from many vendors. How are you going to manage that risk to making sure that the vendors are complying to, you know, the technology that you're asking for?
Yeah, we are talking a lot with Siemens Square, but you are different because you are using your products. And we would like to try open. We would like to have an open system. We are correspond with other cities. We are like to work in a network. Maybe that's a difference because we don't have to sell something and you have to sell something. That's different. And we try to, yeah, we are a social and ecological model project for the whole of Germany. And we are working in steps. So if you see all the plannings I have shown to you, it's only the first step. After the first step, we will look what was run good, what was bad, and then we are going to change. And yeah, we have the task to do it for the whole of Germany, just for the futures of city, and that's why we risk this open source system. Yeah.
Because we know who to talk to when one piece of technology doesn't talk to the other. It doesn't always work, but...
Sometimes we try to talk to Siemens.
And I'm sure our Berlin office is talking. But one last question from that perspective. A very holistic electrical approach, electrical supply approach. And you mentioned that you actually are generating more energy than it's needed on the site. And I'm interested to understand what you're going to do with that excess energy. You're going to store it, you're going to put it back into the grid, you're going to generate some revenue out of that?
Yeah, we have this water-based grid with 40-degree water, and of course we have storage. And yeah, it's just staying in this net. It's only in the whole area of the airport. But like what you... From the industry in the Czech Republic, you give it in the net and you can use it nighttime in the Schumacher quartier. And yeah, we try. We already we do it with E.ON and Stadtwerke, and we just the contract is signed 2 years ago, but already now after the Ukraine war, we changed a bit. We try to bring aircraft. It was forbidden so far in Berlin, but after Ukraine war, it's now allowed. So we bring a windcraft in, and we are thinking about, I don't know if you also have in Siemens Stadtquer, we are thinking about heating out of the earth, just 1,500 meters we going down to earth. And Berlin is very special because the ground is really good and you have no earthquake, and then it's fine for that, and we also try to have that. But we have photovoltaic, of course, and then we have a lot of sources to bring in.
Thank you, Peter. Thank you, Mitra. So I think clearly what we've seen is a scope and scale of innovation in the Tegel project that is very extensive. I'm kind of struggling to think of too many Australian projects that have that many layers. And one of the things I learned yesterday from watching Gudrun's presentation, somewhat shorter presentation, was that layering and that drawing in of so many different types of thinking from different groups was an intentional part of putting it all together. Starting with you, Mitra, one of the things that you mentioned when we were meeting to introduce ourselves for the first time were this issue of enabling factors. Yeah? What is it that enables that scope and scale of innovation in a project like Berlin? So I thought I might just throw to you, and then Peter also to get your view on what those enabling factors are that enables a project like Tegel Project to get up, perhaps contrasting with Australian conditions as you were hinting at before.
That's very cheeky, because that was the question I was going to ask Gudrun. So, I think you started answering it a little bit from that conversation we were just having before about the civil society and the nature of the politics in Berlin. Seem to be, if not unique, then it's particular to Berlin and your history. Obviously, as the city is deep and complex, so that plays into it as well. And it seems to me also you are maybe a city of renters as well in Berlin, where private property ownership hasn't been so absolutely prioritised as it is here in Australia. Is that the case, do you think?
I don't know how the situation is in Melbourne.
Nowhere near comparable with Berlin. How many renters would we have on proportion in 30, 40%?
I should know that statistic, but I'm going to say about 30%. But
yeah, we will have about 80% renters.
And
is Berlin is not it's not an ownership, it's a renting city. Yeah.
Any housing people here that can give us an exact figure? I would say 30 to 40%.
And maybe the difference is also people are renting typically in Australia and in Melbourne a privately owned property, a property that's owned by probably what we call a mum and dad investor rather than a whole building or a corporation's investment.
Yeah, this is the model of the Baugruppe. Mathew mentioned that it's just to have the single family houses, but above each other. Yeah, just 10 families coming together. They build together a house, and then there are the owners, and there's no how we say. No problems, of course, but nobody is gaining something of these houses. Yeah, just you'd only pay what you build, and so it's 30% cheaper than a normal invest house, and that's the idea of the Baugruppe. Just you people, the families and people coming together and build by their own. But the point is you have to trust each other because you're doing something together. At the end, you have a flat, yeah, but that's the idea. You just have 6 level houses, but the ownership like you have it here in single houses.
Yeah, I think from my side, it's about the ownership of the development. If you have the majority stake, or it's underneath a 99-year lease, and Tegel has the rights, you can dictate how it's going to happen, and you have a lot more control than trying to have everyone willing to work together. So to answer your question, Mathew, I think it's about ownership.
Peter and Gudrun, you both touched on the issue of interoperability there before. When I first saw the Tegel project in June, when Bronwyn and myself were visiting Berlin, one of the things I was touched by was this open source concept that you're producing. Obviously, Peter's alluded to some of the issues that he would be well aware of as a global lead in smart infrastructure and smart building, smart technologies, and some of the issues there might be with interoperability. But bearing in mind some of the other global examples of what we might think of as model precincts and cities, if you like, of the future, one that came to mind was the Sidewalk Labs Toronto Harbourside project. I'm not sure if anyone here in the rooms of that knows much about that ill-fated project. It was pretty much their approach to data which sank that project firmly to the bottom of, is it Lake Michigan? Ontario, sorry. Thank you, Chris. It's handy to have someone from the Great Lakes region ever present. So you've taken a very different approach in Berlin with this issue around urban data, gathering of urban data, sharing of urban data. And so I'd just like to get your take on that, Gudrun, and maybe press Peter for a bit more of a response on that. And I can't let that question go, Gudrun, without asking you to explain the Chaos Computer Club to our audience here, for those who may not have gone to Berlin.
I can't explain, you have to do it.
Well, you talk about interoperability first, and if necessary, I'll go into the Chaos Computer Club. So. So it's interoperability and shared data and open data platform. Yeah, why are you doing that and how you think you're going to achieve it? And why that was important.
Yeah, I explained it a bit because we are a model also for digitalization, and that's why we have to try it. Yeah, but actually Germany is in point of digitalization. It's very bad, and it's not the last of Europe, but one of the last places in Europe. And this is because of the Germans are very scared of the data privacy. And so it's very hard to do something like that in Germany, and that's we try to push it in this Tegel project. But in all lectures I have, like the audience is really scared of this data privacy, and I don't. Yeah, it's very hard to do it in Germany. I think other countries in Europe are much better than the Germans are. Yeah.
What's your experience been around data and privacy?
Yeah, well, Siemens is doubling down on digitalisation. It's one of the key initiatives going forward. And so we own a lot of software, especially from the industrial 4.0, where I think we're leading the field in that area. The smart infrastructure space, which is more inside with Tegel, we're getting there, and we're developing software and have platforms. But for us, it's about an ecosystem. We need partners and other platforms to be able to have that interoperability. We don't have the whole data capture there, but so it's an open source for us too. We do have quite some of the platforms and the technologies today, but where we have gaps, we rely on our partners, which then needs that open data topic to make sure it's being addressed on the projects.
Mitra, maybe a response to you to the kind of provocation from Gudrun about one of the underlying parts of the ethos of the Tegel project being that, I don't know if I'm getting the wording right here, adaptability is stronger than planning. So this kind of open idea. I'd just like to get a response from you around that, and if you have any questions on that front for Gudrun.
Thank you. Yeah, I was really struck looking at the plan about your provocation there about adaptability being stronger than planning, but in the plan that you put up there, it seems to me there's still a very strong separation of uses, if you like, what we would say in planning terms. So you have a sector over here for this, a sector here for this, a sector here for this, and living over here. I guess in some of the research I've done and what I've heard and precincts I've been involved in, we're often trying to actually do more integration of live work and also of spaces. So in Melbourne it's been about having a 24-hour city, so postcode 2000, 3000, and then some of the work that's been led out of City Melbourne for sort of 30 years now really, to try and bring life into the city and to move away from that separation of, okay, you come to work, you do your work, you go home, the city empties out, and you go back to your dormitory suburb, which is also kind of quiet during the day. And I think that's been a massive success story for Melbourne, but then now we're seeing it a little bit across Melbourne post-pandemic with the work from home transition, and looking to have more like hub workspaces, and then even in terms of urban manufacturing, trying to allow for spaces inside of the city and the suburban fabric that have like those light industrial uses. So we're not talking toxic activities, just can you make a table, can you do some innovation at home that you might be able to feed into like a global product chain through online or 3D printing or whatever. So I'm just really curious to hear from you about if that thinking is penetrating into the Tegel plan, if you've played with the idea of mixing up the uses a little more, or if maybe I've just read it wrong and actually you do have residential and other uses spread across the district.
No, it's, as you said, it's really next to each other, and it's because of the history. We started in 2008 already with the plannings, because we thought in 2008 the airport will close, but it closed 2020. So you never can plan when an airport will close. And we are coming out of the Vista. It's the south of Germany. It's also innovation industrial area, and we are the next. And we started only with this urban tech republic. And it's research, and we are really proud to have real industry also there. And then the idea is you're going to study there. You're making a startup, and you're coming bigger and bigger, and then you are going to build factories. And that's the idea of the urban Czech Republic. And you are right, there are no flats and no place to live there. We have fire science academy and a lot of stuff like this, but we don't have any flats in this area. And a bit later, this Schumacher quartier came, and this Schumacher quartier is close to the town planning. Actually, the airport was really in the forest, and the Schumacher quartier is close to the underground stations and close to the rest of the city, and so it came one after the other. But if you compare, I mean, for me, one important development, it's in Vienna. It's also an airport. It's the Seestadt Aspern, and you can see there that's really a mixed area. They had this famous Aspern section. So you have the offices and stuff you have, and the 2 levels downstairs, and above you have the flats, and you're coming from the court, you go into the flats, and I think it is a quite clever section. So we don't have something like that in Tegel, and I think in point of town planning and architecture, we are not very special. We are really special in this, like in this layering, what Mathew said, and in thinking in the really complex nets. Structures that's special in Tegel, and if you go to Aspern and if you are in Europe, it's really worth to go. I mean, the planning is 30 years old even there, but but it's already finished, and you can learn a lot of things there. But in times of layering and processing, I think we are quite good, but not in point of architecture and town planning concepts.
So Aspern, Siemens Austria was a partner in that. We were 43% stakeholder in Aspen. Started in 2013, and actually part of my role when I was in Europe was to look after some of the technology streams for Aspen, and I think there was 11 patents developed off Aspen, and we've also implemented some of that technology we developed into our next range of products that we now release into the market. So maybe throw that back to you, Mathew, is Siemens spends about 8% of its turnover on R&D, which equates to about 8 billion Aussie dollars. So how can...
I could take 0.1% of that and be quite happy, Peter. That's the quick answer. So
yeah,
carry
but
on.
yeah, I mean, coming back from Europe, I've got some relationships in headquarters. How can Siemens be part of the CRC more than just sitting on a panel here and discussing the great work that Tegel's doing and Gudrun?
Well, we would love to welcome Siemens to be part of our consortium. I think you bring, obviously, an incredible depth and leadership in technology. Obviously, we're all aware of the contribution to the overarching concept of Industry 4.0, as it was initially known in the German study. So I think the approach that the Tegel Project is taking is exactly right. It's a participatory one. It's inviting the industry in. It's not this kind of adversarial almost relationship where we sell it off and say goodbye, but those technology companies that are coming into Tegel Project are going to be part of that. We were talking a little bit just before the session began, Peter and Mitra and myself, about what that unique role is that a CRC can play in this, which is not wholly dissimilar to the approach that the Tegel Project has taken to get all of the relevant stakeholders, government, industry, research around the table to try to tackle some of these big problems. And more than just do projects, actually put real built solutions into play. So I think having all of those necessary stakeholders at the table enables us to be doing work on the policy end of the spectrum, be doing work on the research and looking around the corner for what's coming, but also be dealing with the here and now problems that industry have and want to get out there and actually put it into play. So on all three of those fronts, we can work together. And so I would very much welcome that conversation. And I didn't know about the tie-in with Aspen, but that makes my pitch to you, Peter, that much easier, which is that yesterday we were talking very much about putting together a tour organised by Building 4.0 CRC to take our stakeholders and other members who might be interested on a tour to Europe to look at some of these leading sites. It's been a wonderful, obviously, relationship to get to know Gudrun and then to have her down and to go on this multi-city side tour that we will in the next few days. And so we're really hoping to build on that goodwill and that spirit of collaboration to take a group up and look at these model examples. And I would hope that I could call on your assistance to maybe get us an introduction at Aspen, should that be required.
If the King of Sweden's not in town.
This is an anecdote that we desperately tried to go and see Siemensstadt 2.0 in Berlin when we were there. Keith Ritchie, sitting in the front row, was kind enough to set up an introduction to the local Berlin team. And sadly, within about 24 hours, we got a rejection note, the reason being that the King of Sweden was visiting and they just had no capacity. So I thought if I'm going to get pipped at the line, then it should be by the King of Sweden, as far as I'm concerned.
But I understand he won't be touring Aspen anytime soon, so I'm sure we can accommodate that.
Safe zone, safe zone. Could be the King of Denmark. I wouldn't mind just closing with some comments. We did start a little late, and that's why we've run on a little later here, but I think it's a fascinating comment that, I'm not going to close. I am going to ask for a final comment or response from both Mitra and Peter on the issue of what do we think Australia can learn from the Tegel Project. Mitra.
We've covered it several times today, but the land ownership and funding model obviously is key. Without that, you can't control outcomes, and if you can't control outcomes, you can't arc for that excellence that you are obviously trying for here on all those layers and nets which you speak of, which are critical to climate-proof, to sustainable, to giving back, regenerative, if you like, places. So we are looking at those models in Australia. The latest kind of social housing funding in Victoria is looking at a ground lease model, not dissimilar to that. So there's innovation happening there, but I think we can take a lesson, particularly in those larger scale projects, about the importance of trying to hold on to that part of it and not let it go so easily, or to try and work the funding so you can see how you get that longer term outcome in a longer cycle. And also that participatory approach you've taken is really inspiring and obviously very long term and deep. And that is also something that I think we can find challenging to do as governments. I'm in state government, and I think there's a wariness probably of over-promising and under-delivering, and so wanting to try and solve all the problems before you go out there and tell people how you've done it. And that's the design and defend, the DAD model. We know intellectually, or in the theory, that it's not great, but it's still like instinctively you just kind of want to do it because you're a bit afraid. So to go out there first and ask people what their aspirations are, I think is really fantastic, and you're clearly leading the way there, so well done.
The DAD model.
Sorry. It's true.
That's great. Look, apart from the ownership, and I think that's key, I think being bold, having a very holistic view and really putting it out there as part of the whole design ecosystem around it. Technology's there today, and there's more being developed. So yeah, being bold and aspirational, I think, is key to what Australia can do. As I said, I've been living overseas for 17 years, and the window into Australia has been a bit dim sometimes. But yeah, it's exciting to be home and to see what sort of developments Australia in the different states can do. I think it's something I'm looking forward to in the next years. So yeah.
Well, thank you, I think, for what was a very interesting discussion. I too am taken with DAD. I'm going to use that all the time, if you don't mind, Mitra. I'd like to thank our respondents, Mitra, Anderson, Oliver, and Peter Halliday, for coming. And of course, I would like to thank very much Gudrun for taking the journey to the other side of the world to talk about her project with us.